It was the spring of 2020, when the world suddenly plunged into an unexpected nightmare. COVID-19 changed everything, and I, an 18-year-old boy, half child and half adult, had to face the loneliness and terrifying stillness of days without school and without meeting friends. But in that strange space, I found something more peculiar, a mysterious sense of freedom, as if I were liberated from all the constraints of the outside world. I enjoyed wandering through deserted forests, abandoned urban areas, and places where no one dared to venture. Stories about unsolved murders, strange creatures, and souls lurking in the darkness fascinated me more than ever. They didn't scare me. Instead, they made me feel like I was living in a horror movie, a movie in which I could be the main character. One night, at the end of April, when the stars were obscured by clouds, and the moon was just a faint glow in the sky, I decided to invite Clarissa, a new classmate I had just met, to join me on an exploration that I knew would be an adventure like no other. Clarissa was a gentle girl, quiet, but always made me feel a strange harmony. She has something vulnerable about her, as if she is trying to protect something very important that others cannot understand. We arrived at Opschnobel Park around 3 a.m. It's one of my favorite places, where the towering old trees stand like giant pillars guarding the land below. During the day, it's a lush, beautiful park. But at night, when the shadows stretch long and the biting cold seeps into every corner, it becomes a different world, a world full of mystery and darkness. I parked my car at the main entrance of the park, where the dim light from the street lamps shone down onto the ground, just enough for us to see the path ahead. No one likes to come here at night except for the reckless and the curious like us. "You're not scared, are you?" I asked, trying to joke to lighten the heavy atmosphere surrounding us. Clarissa just chuckled softly, but I noticed a hint of anxiety in her eyes. She didn't say anything, just walked alongside me. We walked down the main trail, turned off all the flashlights, and let the darkness envelop us. The dense trees created a barrier that made the space feel suffocating, as if the light from the distant stars could never break through this dark shell. "Do you feel anything strange?" Clarissa whispered, her voice as gentle as the wind, but I felt as if each word slid past my ears unnaturally. I turned to look at her and noticed she was staring into the space ahead, her eyes wide open, as if trying to see something far away. I didn't answer right away, but inside, I began to feel a sense of unease. Nights like this always carry something unexplainable, as if everything around me is waiting, watching silently, following our every step. Suddenly, a flute starts to play, gently and clearly, but with a strangely gloomy quality. The music seems to invade the space, sneaking into every corner of my soul, making me feel like I'm lost in another world, a world where the presence of the unseen is casting a web, waiting. Clarissa stopped, her eyes wide open. "Do you hear it?" she asked, her voice trembling. I nodded, but inside I couldn't make sense of where the sound was coming from. It wasn't the flute of a player. It felt like an invisible sound, abruptly appearing in the air. We both stood still, not daring to move. The flute sound continued to rise, growing louder, as if it were getting closer, as if someone were standing right in front of us, playing a beautiful but eerie melody. Each note carried a strange power, making it impossible for me to break free from it. "We have to go," she said, her voice nearly choked. "Don't you feel it? What's happening?" I looked at her, my eyes failing to hide my fear. It wasn't just her who felt something strange. I did too. The sound of the flute was impossible to identify, swirling around us, endlessly repeating like a spiral with no end. "Don't worry," I said, my voice trembling but trying to stay calm. "We just need to turn around, leave here." We turned our backs and started to run, but only a few seconds later, from somewhere in the darkness, another sound arose. This time it was the rustling of leaves, branches cracking under the footsteps of some creature. The atmosphere around us became heavy, as if something was holding us back, preventing us from moving on. And then I heard the flute, this time so clear that I felt its vibrations in my chest. It was no longer just a simple flute. It was a sweet, smooth melody, but at CT my eyes could no longer see her. Instead, I only saw twisting shadows, as if they were starting to overwhelm the space, an invisible force rising from the ground. And the flute did not stop unceasing, as if it were leading us into a land that had never existed. When I turned back, I realized something. It was not a human figure or a creature, but a vague, tall silhouette with features I could not comprehend. It stood there, in the darkness, motionless, but I could feel an inexplicable power, an invisible presence that was more palpable than anything. "Do you see anything?" Clarissa whispered, her voice puzzled. I couldn't answer, because I, too, didn't know what to do. I felt trapped in a dream from which I could not wake up. Suddenly, the flute stopped, abruptly and silently, as if it were just an illusion, a resonance from some distant moment. But in that silence, I heard another sound, very faint, like a whisper. I couldn't understand what it was, but I could feel the hidden invitation in it. Calling me, calling Clarissa. "Clarissa!" I shouted one more time, but this time my voice sounded as if it shattered in the air. Everything around me became blurry, as if it was no longer real.